that was it. I needed to log back in.
Okay, we're good.
I would just assume that it's live. It's just I'll just need to make sure that I've got everything turned off on the.
I've got a message
not
telling
live
me
at the minute.
Right. I've got a message saying it's now streaming.
Repeating back. Just 2 secs. Just 2 secs. Just 2 secs. Just 2 secs. Right. So we'll clear all that up in post production, and so we are here to talk about the new Pacific and Southeast Asia book, which I think quite a lot of people have been waiting for quite a while. Hopefully, you've had the chance to read. I think Mark's article's gone out, hasn't it? And Martin's is going to go out. So we've got some articles coming up for you to peruse. I won't mention our competitors by name, but I noticed there was a couple of articles up. One of them promising a deep dive into the mysteries of the AC-1 Sentinel, which could be covered off by saying usable as a tractor. So I'm going to throw over to Mark before I let my historical ranting.
It could be a transport card.
Before I let my ranting persona take over.
We will come to the mythology of the Pacific book.
Yeah,
okay.
We are going to have to. But you're going to kind of split, right, mate?
Yeah, we're going to kind of split this into 3 parts. So I've been covering the Japanese because I'm a beardy power gamer. And before Martin takes the Australians and Richard's his favourite nation, the Americans. So Japanese, that's what it's all about, really. The Pacific book, let's be honest, because it's fundamentally different, and that's what I was trying to get across in the article. So for those who haven't played it previously in version 3, because we had them in early war and late war in version 3, the Japanese have a host of crazy rules that make them play like nothing else in Flames of War. So let's start from the top. So like the Soviets, they can assault 6 inches. They have this rule called Banzai. But unlike the Soviets, who have that rule, they don't have a base 4+ save. They've got their normal infantry 3+ save. They can attack at night. Same rules as the British, so that if you've got attacking in a mission of minefields, you can elect to attack at night. But the difference is that all their infantry formations have nice attack, so do their scouts, and so do all their tank formations as well. So that's pretty unique. You don't come across other nations who can take a tank formation out of the book, fit with infantry, and all leave the deployment zone. So that's pretty cool. But it gets better. The key thing about the Japanese is you can't stop them in defensive fire. So they're a bit like to quote famous dead war strategists, the bomber will always get through. So you throw enough bodies to get past the defensive fire, you can't pin it down with 5 hits. You can't pin it down with 10 hits. You can't pin it down with 40 hits. They are going to get through and they're going to attack you. Now, there is a little bit of balancing that goes on there because they do get a 4+ save in defensive fire. A little bit. They're hit on 3s. You can't take cautious. You can't take cautious troops. They're always going to be hit on 3s, 4 at night, and then obviously cover, and they can get access to cheap smoke as well. And they're going to get 4+ save. So their platoons high. Broadly, you're getting 10 stands plus some light mortars, but in terms of assault troops, you're getting up to about 10 stands. They're nasty. And the great thing is, if you can get a heck of a lot of them. So we're already playing around. I'm writing an article at the minute on the Building a Better List series and tactics of the Japanese, and I'm looking at it going a straight up 6 formations on table. Sorry, 6 formations, 6 platoons on table with double HQ, even when I've got reserves. Flood the zone, as the American Marines.
It's not what you call a finesse army, is it?
It's not a finesse army.
Get on the table and ram it straight down someone's throat.
We'll go to the finesse. I've jumped straight to the craziness. So you can stick those on table, and I can remember playing. It might have been I think it might have been Ben from Break for Assault, or back in the day. I'm sure in V3 I can remember he used to sit down with his opponent and he used to go, hi, I'm Ben, I've got Japanese and I'll be attacking at night. He just put them down and then just ran at the enemy. And if he won, he won, and if he didn't, it was over quickly. And that's kind of, one of the Japanese approaches. You're gonna stick down a lot of troops, and you can't hang around. If you're attacking, you're gonna go at the enemy, so they can't whittle you down. And it's about the tactics of getting through. It sounds really easy. Having done a bit of play testing with them, it's not. There's some real actual nuance to get the most out of them about how you assault, how you mix your platoons together. So I'll try and explain it in one of the articles, but often, because you can't be stopped in defensive fire, but you need to get enough bodies in, it's often better to go multiple platoons in one assault, so they have to split the defensive fire, and they only get one set of defensive fire, rather than going one platoon followed by another platoon followed by another platoon. So there's all sorts of ways you've got to manage it and deploy. But I'm really looking forward to playing them. I'm not looking forward to painting 60 plus stands of infantry. That's going to be an interesting project.
They don't have a lot. They're all brown. So
just have some bases that are very dark and say they're attacking at night.
But the rules don't stop there. They're wood elves, as I call them as well. So they can use terrain. They can dash 12 inches through terrain, which means you can do it at night as well. Apart from, oddly, as Eddie pointed out to me, the naval infantry can't. They don't have that rule, but the normal rifle platoons do. You can also, their artillery and guns really only come in platoons of 2, but most of certainly the core artillery has a quick fire rule, so they don't get penalised for having less than 3 guns. So you don't have to re-roll hits, and you can get core smoke with them.
So they re-roll for 1 gun, but not for 2.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they've got some pretty good stats. They're hitting on 3s in assault. They are, they're confident, but with 3+ counter assault. But it's the naval infantry. It's all about the naval infantry. The naval infantry, you are getting 2+ counter attacks with your and you put your HQ with them, and you're always getting in on the assault, and it's like you might as well just fall back, guys. You haven't got much AP, so everything has a downside, doesn't it? And the Japanese, let's just put it away, the Japanese tanks are not going to destroy tanks. I mean, I think that before we had the wild cards, the best AT I think is 8, and that's if you pay a premium for it. Otherwise, it's 6 on the top of my head,
6.
Which is on the Type 97. So yeah, if you come up against a lot of medium armor, which is quite popular in mid-war at the minute, and 10 T-34s, you might get assaulted and have to give some ground, but it's still quite hard to kill, and you are then going to take all those machine gun shots. So they are situational, and you need to be able to adapt to what you're facing. You do get the human bullet card for simulating the Niki Naki Nu teams with their kind of lunge mines. So it's like the other cards you get in all the packs. So they're AT3 in assault, but the nuance is you don't have to assign it to a platoon. It's for a formation, so you can use it on any platoon of infantry at any point. Whereas everybody else, like with Molotov cocktails, has to say who's it on at the beginning of the game. So that's pretty handy. You never quite know it's going to pop up, and you can take multiples of it. So that does help. Again, it comes back to the naval infantry because they get access in core as well as an option in support for 75mm guns. They're pretty well priced, and they're AT10 large guns, rate of fire 2, but firepower 3. And they're going to, when you have to defend, they're pretty nice. And like, as I say, they're core, and you can create that balanced army. We were chatting on our about one of the England DTC groups. We were just spitballing about some of the guys in the blogger on it were spitballing about what you could take, but it's hard. It's hard if you want to deal with tanks, and I think there's going to be some people that do some great things with it. It's what I would say. It's a very powerful list, but it's going to be a powerful list only in experienced hands. It's not something you're going to rock up with and completely power game with it because it's so outrageously good. And if you don't really know the ins and outs of the game, it's going to reward complex play, I think. The article I'm doing is going to look as well about some of the nuances of defending with it. So again, flooding the zone as a defender, and defending ahead of the objective to force people to assault you. And you're kind of taking a mentality of, you've got 6 turns to get within 8 inches of that objective. And if you do get within 8 inches of that objective, on that final turn, I just need to have enough stands to assault you, and you need to fail your counterattack, and I'm going to push you back. And that's an interesting way to play as well. Most armies can't really rely on that because they get stopped in defensive fire, whereas the Japanese, as I say, just have to have enough bodies in order to survive the incoming and get into assault against those tanks or infantry. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be really good. I think it's really going to mix up the meta. I see heavy machine guns suddenly coming back into vogue because you're really going to want some machine gun shots, whereas the meta is quite medium armor heavy at the minute. So you tend not to often see so much of the anti-infantry stuff, but that's going to become really vital. So yeah, there's a couple of, we'll touch on, I didn't in the article, there's some wild cards. People have noticed about the Tiger because the Japanese were meant to get a Tiger off the Germans, but it never arrived. So obviously won't be allowed in, certainly in the UK and broadly European events, ETC, etc. There's a list of allowed wild cards or allowed units. So anything that didn't see combat is on a list that you can't use. So you're not going to be using the Tiger. I have to flash the book up in front of me. There's a couple of other ones.
You got the Honey, which did at least see service, which is actually a good tank.
Which one?
The SPG, the Honey.
Yeah,
that's quite a useful weapon.
And I think that's the one that did see.
That's all service, yeah.
But
that's all service.
Is it not?
I think that's going to be on the allowed list.
Is it not post?
Yeah,
43?
so the
1945. Source service in 1945.
Right, so not playable in mid-war then.
So the Type 4 won't be in mid-war,
no.
Which is a shame because that's an 80-12 front armor 7 tank. Rather expensive in points though. I'm not sure I'd necessarily be taking them, but it would have been useful to. One of the big problems the Japanese have is when you've got reserves, so you're in fair fights or you're gone defend, you don't have any really high point units. You've got lots of units that are lower points. So your reserves are going to have kind of 4 to 5 units in, and that's tricky.
I mean, that's the way people are going to deal with them, right? Because defending with them is going to be very difficult because against tanks. You've just, they've trawled through the Japanese armory and found something with a high velocity that was used as a coastal defense piece. And wasn't trekked into the jungle, but hey, that'll do. So anybody who's got any sense is going to go, well, I'm not going to have a scenario with minefields and let you come at me in the dark. So I think that they're slightly the not stopping is better than it was in V3, but they could always night attack in V3. So they were a little bit more powerful, I guess.
Problematic. They were more problematic to face.
They were.
So they're easier to counter. I think you're right. I don't think they're going to be. I think people are going to look at it and go, "Oh, great, fantastic," and then you go, "But your plan only works if you're attacking, and if you're in a fair fight mission, it's going to be a lot."
Yeah, I think they're going to be difficult to play with in the maneuver mission. If you end up in a maneuver mission, the other thing, they're inevitably going to struggle against any kind of heavy tank, particularly numerous ones.
Are they though?
Yeah, I can't see you. I can't
but
see
you don't
them.
need to kill them.
No, you've got to push them still, right? But the problem you've got is you can push them back. You can out. You will always. You will nearly always out motivate your opponent with the Japanese.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly if you take some of those command cards. The banners are a good example of that. If you put the banners and the regimental banners in there as well.
Yeah, 2 up counter. Yeah,
2 up counter attacks, 2 up to hit. Yeah, you're going to get in. You're going to get lots of hits. But even with the human bullets, you're still at best 83. Yeah. And if you're facing a heavy tank with top armor 2, they're going to. I can see them struggling, particularly against the Soviets. If in an open environment, but that kind of reflects
5 KB is going to be
and the Churchill's going to bully you as well. the Churchill tank is going to be a bit of a challenge for them to deal with, because you haven't got anything that can hurt them in terms of shooting.
But this comes back to the problem is you can.
But I don't think that's a bad thing though. I think that's probably a good thing, because otherwise I think they would be an absolute mess.
I think if you take them against what the other stuff in the book, right? If you play within the book,
I think they're extremely difficult to deal with.
I think
with any of the lists,
I think you almost have to play Australians to give yourself a chance, because the Australians have some of the ability to massacre them in close combat.
Actually, I think the key with the Australians against the Japanese is weight of fire.
Yeah,
the Australians and the US Marines, they're both very good in assault.
Yeah,
just like the Japanese.
The Brits and Indians are
the Brits and the Indians are going to really struggle.
Well, and in that arguably
space.
that's
which is probably right. Yeah,
it's historical. Yeah.
It's right.
Well, in fact, I think the way they've balanced up setting aside all the stuff that we're going to come to in a minute, if you look at it, who was the first Allied nation to beat the Japanese in World War II? If you discount the Sino-Japanese War, it's the Australians at Milne Bay.
Yeah,
the Aussies have got a really good chance. Even the Chocos have got a really good chance, I think, against them. On Kokoda, the Marines are good lists. I'll come to the Americans and my view that it doesn't really add. I don't think the American Army list adds an awful lot, except shotguns for your M3s and Shermans. But I think I didn't hate the book in book.
No,
I think the reason that I've got issues with it are because it becomes very difficult to play out of book unless you start frigging around with it.
Yeah,
and that was the problem that they had in V3.
Yeah, the Japanese don't translate to anywhere other out of the Pacific very well. No. I can see the Australians would. I think the Australians would translate very nicely against almost anything. They've got a little bit of weakness in their general list setup, but
they've got the same problem, which is no high-end AT.
Well, no, but they do. But they do at least have 89. In quite, you can put 89. Yeah, you can put the grants. The grants and Lees.
Well, that presupposes that they are allowed. You're allowed to use the grants.
You can take Allied M10s. I know you like Allied.
Are you allowed to ally outside of book? Outside of theatre?
Yeah. There's no restriction on that.
Nothing that says you can't.
Yeah,
I don't know what actually.
But that just gets into why the whole.
I know. I'm winding you up
for me. But I think if you look at it as a book, as a campaign book, and you played, God forbid, actually played a campaign or something like that with it, I actually think the lists nicely stack up against each other, and you don't need any of the silly stuff to make them actually work. It will come
to a nice firestorm event, wouldn't it? If you just had Australians, Americans, a bit of Ireland.
And,
it wouldn't be island hopping in middle, would it really?
We'll come to the glaring error in a minute, won't we? Shall we go to Martin to talk about the Australians and
I'll talk about a bit. I'll talk about the Commonwealth in general, if you like. Fred has actually written the British and Indian part of it, and I've done the Australian part. So there'll actually be 2 articles on the Commonwealth troops. The British basically are British. And that's probably all you really need to know.
That's what they are.
Well, they're not even particularly good British. They're
and the Indians are bad British with an extra bit.
But yeah, they're a bit better in assault. They've got the war cry rule, so you've got to motivate to counter assault. Double motivate. You always got to motivate to counter assault against them.
Yeah,
and things like that, which is quite nice. You've got some nice flavour. You've got a couple of useful bits of equipment in there. But the Commonwealth kind of main thing that the book ushers in is the £2 a gun. Oddly enough, is the way I kind of see it. Interestingly, that I think the most interesting choice I thought Battlefront have made in the totality of the initial first 9 waves of releases, I think it is, I read today, is the fact that the starter army comes with £6 guns, which was without a doubt, in my opinion, a opportunity missed. Because if that box came with £2 guns, you could then field it as Australians or as British and Indians. Yes. As it is at the moment, if you're looking to collect an Australian army, that box is really not worth the money, because you're going to have to go and replace all the guns.
And remodel all of your submachine guns.
Yeah, you've got what you can go. They are releasing the metal.
Are they with the Owen?
With the Owen, but it comes in a platoon. The desert platoon. It's the old desert platoon.
Yeah. That's what I thought
Repatched.
it was actually.
Yeah.
Very similar.
So as you can only have 2 Owen SMG teams per platoon, are you going to really worry about it? Be interesting to see what's in the packs actually with the Commonwealth infantry pack. What actually comes in that? What all the models are actually equipped with? Whether you've actually got some guys who will do nicely for your own machine gunners, or whether you just not bother. But so the British are British pretty much. The Australians themselves, they're a standard British, as they said in the article, which will come out. They follow the standard British Army composition, right? Don't expect anything unusual in that front. There's one nice little tweak in the rifle platoons, in that one of your carrier patrols can be dismounted, for which you can field a spectacular, I think it's 9 stands.
Yeah, nine Bren stands.
9 Bren stands, and they're quite nice troops. They're not quite as good in an assault, or they've got a weaker counterattack, I think it is. They don't get the bulldog counterattack, but they do still hit.
And they're not as good in assault. They hit on
4s rather than 3s, which is a shame. But they're still cautious. They're quite cost effective on the points, and they chuck out a lot of dice.
Yeah, 3 and 2, aren't they?
3 2
3 stationary, 2 pins.
Yeah, they're effectively MG troops, range 16 in essence. Which, if you're facing the Japanese, if you can shoot more shots further, that's better than most people. The Japanese aren't going to be shooting you; they're rough 1-1, so you haven't got to worry about taking hits from them. All you've got to do is worry about keeping them at bay. How you go about that? So the Aussie forces are quite nice. The infantry are equally as potent as the Japanese. They don't have the motivation. They don't have the 6-inch charge. They can be just as fast. There's an excellent command card that allows you to add porters to your forces in Papua New Guinea, which gives you an extra 4 inches to your dash movement. Now, it says dash on the card, which is interesting, because there is no actual rating of dash. So I assume that applies to all 3 of the dash movement types, because it doesn't say it doesn't.
Yeah. Terrain dash, road dash.
Which is what it says on the stats. The card, it just says dash, which is interesting. So potentially you've got a 20. I think it works a 20-inch dash on those with a follow me. You can move them, that's through terrain, or it's 24 inches through cross country. You can do 24 inches down a road with them if you really want to. Without too much difficulty. They're veterans. They're gonna motivate. They're gonna do the orders. Like most things in the book, they're pretty hard to fail those. So they can redeploy very rapidly, which is quite interesting. And you can also give that card to the gun teams. It's a gun or infantry card. It's quite unusual. Which with the 2-pounder, that's actually quite handy if you want to move them around. But the trouble is, the 2-pounder versus the Japanese isn't particularly useful because it's got no HE. And invariably, which invariably you're probably facing infantry in the main. So it's a little bit of a disadvantage. The one thing they don't have, which would have made them really good, is they don't have access to the 6-pounder gun. Probably accurate historically, but it's a little bit of a shame in gaming terms. So they're a little bit short. They've got a lot of mid-level AT, which is great for shredding Japanese tanks because they're armor 1 or 2.
Tank 7's fine against the
Japanese. AT 7 firepower 4 against the Japanese armor is more than enough. When you're chucking out 2 or 3 shots, and you've got decent sized platoons. The Australian tanks are quite interesting. Now, I know this is going to trigger it. We'll go with what's in the book. You get 3 flavors of tank in the book. One of which is the infamous AC-1 Sentinel, which is a wild, it's a wild card option. So we just want him to go. It's not a wild card. It's not a wild. It's a what if option.
Yeah.
What if we had actually sent these into the war? Now, in Battlefront terms, the AC-1 Sentinel is actually quite a good tank. It's got decent armor. It's got a decent gun. It's got average tank mobility. and it's a reasonable amount of points. It's quite nice overall. I'll let Rich talk more about the realities of it. But if you ignore the fact that it didn't work and wasn't much use, there's a reason it didn't go anywhere, despite the numbers made. The other two options, you've got Stuart's rule that's come back in with the Pacific book is the canister ammunition for the Stuarts. However, when you get it, but it also comes with a downside. You get an extra point of ROF, but if you've moved, you get +1 to hit with it. So if you've actually moved, you're better off just firing your 5 machine guns rather than having 6 shots on a 4 as opposed to 5 shots on a 3. Statistically, you're better off just firing the 30 cals.
Yeah, same
if you've
firepower,
moved.
Same firepower. And
There is
5 6, isn't it?
They're all firepower. It's all firepower 6. But for shredding it, but in defensive fire, they've got an extra point of AT, which is nice. The drawback, of course, is your British organisation, so you've only got 3 tanks. So you're only chucking out 18 dice, even if you have got them all. HQ is quite good. You've got an extra tank in there. Again, following the British formation, the British structure, you've got the 4-tank HQ. But the Stuart...
I would point out that would kill 6 Japanese stands. It's long as they're not at 9.
Yeah. In
a lot.
Yeah, you potentially will kill quite a lot of stands. If you can get them all, which is nice. It won't stop, as you say, it won't stop the assault. So, and then your other option, of course, in the book, is to take the Grant or the Lee.
They're all Lees, by the way.
I know they were all Lees, Rich. I did go and look it up. I did go and look when I saw it, and I suspect that's probably why they say use either model. They use the Grant or the Lee, and they both got the same profile. Yeah. They both have the standard Grant standard profile, same profile mix. You've got an option to in both of those the Lee, the M3, both of the M3 version formations. You can swap one of your platoons around to the other type of tank, which potentially is quite nice. I think you can build quite a nice Stuart formation, and chuck in one unit of the heavier tanks to give you a bit of anti-tank punch, should you feel the need. I think that's possibly quite a good way forward. And then the Australians' last formation is commandos. They've got a commando list, so you can
get a bit dodgy from a tier.
Very good. What the big problem with it is the platoons are very small. They're only 5 stands base. They're quite expensive. Yes, they're very good.
Very good.
But as a first choice, they're not much. You probably wouldn't take them as your first choice because they've got no integral support of any description. It is literally commandos, or scout commandos, which are just even more expensive versions of commandos with spearhead and scout. Otherwise, they're not quite as good in assault. They lose one of the. They don't hit on 2s in assault. They hit on 3s.
Dreadfully.
It's a tough gig to get scout and spearhead. But as an option, what I like with the commandos actually is having them as an option to support the tanks, because the tank formation, both of the tank formations are around 50 points. So you can then throw in 4 platoons of commandos and an HQ and still have enough points left over to have some 25-pounders, which gives you you can build quite a strong force, double formation force that way. So they're quite nice. There's something different, I think, which is quite nice about them. And what I did like was I think in general they'll be able to hold their own against most things in most theatres. Yeah, there's going to be the odd formation where they're going to, again, if you've got a load of Soviet heavy tanks, they may be going to struggle. But against the general standard German armies, Eastern Front or North African German armies, they'll do okay. They'll stand up against Americans, being cautious and veteran rather than green and aggressive. You have got an option with the Australians again as well. You can downgrade them by taking the militia, the Chocos, the militia, which actually
they're not bad either. Actually,
no, they're not. They're as good as the British.
Yeah.
and they've got more firepower. And the interesting thing is that the basic metric is if you go with the militia, you get 3. If you go with the regulars, you get 2. So if you're playing against if you're playing in theatre in the Pacific against the Japanese, I actually, if thinking about it from a defensive perspective, actually more platoons is better against them. So they might actually be really worth considering.
Yeah, and they're
as
not,
your choice.
They're no slouches in the sock.
They're still cautious. They're still cautious.
Yeah, and they're no.
They're aggressive.
No,
they're
aggressive.
They're aggressive, but they're still they
still hit on.
Doesn't really matter the Japanese.
They still hit on.
No, because they're not shooting you anyway, unless generally.
Counterattack 4, assault 4 or assault 3. They're better.
Assault 3. They're not quite as good.
Yeah, so they're militia soldiers, but they still quite are when they get into.
But what they call it, they're described as they're not militia as in the
citizen
general.
Militia.
They're the citizen soldiery.
Yeah.
As opposed to
unit I think has been overlooked. So because I was looking through the book earlier. So in mid-war, you can't until now you couldn't take platoons of 6 pounders.
No.
So the
the
British, right? Is it the rifle formation?
British rifles have 6, up to 6.
Have 6, and because they're green, they're cheap. So they're less than 2 points a gun.
Yeah,
and you can take 6 of them, and they're cautious.
Yeah,
I'll follow the surprise. They're 9 points for 6.
Yeah,
but 9 points for 6 pounders. I don't care if they're green. Something's gone desperately wrong if I'm fighting in close combat with them and having to redig them in. That's cheeky. I like that. That is a amazing ambush.
It's potent.
And I'm okay with that because actually, no one's running around at the minute going, "Oh, those British." That's the bee's knees of mid-war.
Yeah, definitely not.
My problem in all of this is all of this makes the Germans worse, and the Germans are, I think, in a pretty bad place at the minute. Their medium armor, because it's not so much the points, it's because of their structure and how you create enough core platoons, because you don't get the infantry and the recce and all those things in their formations. It's really, really hard place, and having crazy Japanese running against you, and you've only got a few tanks, or if you're staying a lot of points on a Panther, you don't want them anywhere near Japanese. And now you've got 6 cheap 6 pounders and other shenanigans from Australia.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I'd take the British infantry. I'm not sure I would take a South Asia British list because it's not great. So look, I'll quickly do the Americans, and then we can talk a little
all the
bit
things that wrangle
about some of the where the book, which I've said I quite like as a book,
it's actually a great product.
Start
it's wonderful,
apart a little bit. So,
but you can then have your history rant, Richard.
The Marines are good. So the Marines are sort of similar to the Aussies, and they get you can have Marine Shermans and Marine Stuarts.
Sorry, never say that to an American Marine.
Well,
you're a bit like
I don't know very many, right? So I think I'm probably going to be okay.
You find them by the crayons.
yeah. Actually, I went to university with an ex-Marine.
I'll point out I am a United States Marine Corps weapons tactics instructor.
Oh, good.
With the proper patch
from your hotel room.
So I take the right
many miles behind the front lines. Yeah. Sorry, let's reinforce RAF stereotypes. So the Marines are okay, and you can get Marine tanks. The problem with the Marine tanks is that that's all you get in a formation. You get some Stuarts or some Shermans.
Yeah, you don't get the extra bits.
There's no way of bulking them out a little bit. But the stats are nice, and obviously they look a bit different to US infantry in North Africa and Sicily. I don't know what the American infantry list adds other than something to fight in Guadalcanal with. It's pretty much it's pretty much the same as a standard American
North Africa list. I actually thought it was exactly the same. I've struggled to find any differences.
You can't add an extra bazooka.
Oh, it's only one bazooka.
Only one bazooka.
So
the question is, why would you take it? Because you can't add an extra bazooka, right?
Yeah.
So they get a couple of things that I don't think Americans is not my big thing in mid-war. I tend to use, and I use American style lists in late war. You get for those of you that are aficionados of Kelly's Heroes, you can have the half track with a 75mm gun on it that they've got that the guy from the Blues Brothers drives in Kelly's Heroes. But I didn't think that the American division actually added too much, but I thought the Marines were really nice. I think part of the problem is all of the really interesting American Pacific War stuff comes in 1944.
Yeah.
And it's not in the book. Also, so I don't know if they're going to do. So I don't know, and I don't expect anybody to break their NDA. But, the Amtracs and the Stuart flamethrower and that sort of stuff, it's all from 1944. That being said, however, that has not stopped stuff which is also from 1944 making its way into this book. And this is where the stuff starts to grate a little. So big problem for me is, why do we have two imaginary formations of Australian tanks? The Sentinel, there were 65 built. They used them in a film to be German tanks, and then sold them to farmers to use as tractors. And the Lees never left Australia. They were used for training and never left Australia. Stuarts they used in New Guinea in the early part, but they kind of got rid of them quite quickly because they just decided that Matildas were good enough. They used Matildas all the way through till the end of the war, and it's the big glaring. I think that's the big glaring thing that's missing out of the book. That there's the no Matilda, and using up the two slots to do these things. And I know some people will play with them, and I guess there's people from Australia who want to play with the Sentinels. It's just not my thing. Same thing a little bit with the Brits. So you can have some Valentine support, which is absolutely right. There were Valentines in the Arakan in 43, but you're allowed to take a Lee Grant, and they were a mix of Lees and Grants. And interestingly, in the book, it says, when they first saw action at the Battle of the Admin Box, move swiftly on, don't mention the date of the Battle of the Admin Box. And then it says and then in late February 1944, they were moved to. Well, of course, the Battle of the Admin Box was in February 1944. So that formation of tanks never fought in the mid-war. The Lees, it's the Indian Dragoons, 25th Indian Dragoons, I think. They got the tanks in 43. They moved into the back of the Arakan in 43, but they weren't deployed until 44. The Nikohaku teams, the Lunge Mine, 1944. So
which is possibly why it's not actually in the book.
Yeah, I did wonder why because they were.
I have noticed it's on the special order catalogue though.
Yeah. Well,
so you can buy them.
It depends, I guess, if they're going to do
if there's going to be a.
But they were in version 3, so they were in version 3 from early war. So they were. From early. There's a little. Yeah, they were in early war with Nikohaku teams, and the Lunge Mine was in late 44. I'm not sure about the commando swap outs for flamethrowers, because I've been trying to find a TOE for the cavalry commando units, and I can find some use for them in 45, but not sure that's a straight swap out. Then I get silly and go, why is there a picture of a 40mm armed Hurricane? And then the stats are for the bomb armed version with the 303s. Then it's that weird thing. So the Black Cat Division, 17th Indian, the battalion they have highlighted is a Gurkha battalion, and then they've gone with Indian figures. Well, there's plenty of India. They could have used Rajputs or Jats or one of the other Indian, but they've gone with Gurkhas, who actually look much more like with the slouchy hat.
They wear, as I say, the old. And interestingly, the Gurkha models don't appear to be coming back. So
no, so you're going to have to use
which is a shame.
Or a shock horror. Other manufacturers.
Other manufacturers could provide. Yeah.
So. When I saw it, I think, as I say, I was a bit underwhelmed with some of the things that they'd chosen. You could have done, with a little bit of thought about it, you could have actually done some, if you're going to do if you're going to do completely imaginary stuff, there's actually some fun things that you could have done. So, for example, in the Arakan, one of the Indian divisions has its divisional recce half mounted, half motorized. So you could have done a little bit of you could have spruced up your First World War cavalry model and done a cavalry unit and had that as recce. I might
Yeah,
model
because it's quite interesting when you read the section on the Japanese scout platoons. They again Battlefront
Cycles.
talk about but Battlefront actually talk about the Japanese being mounted on ponies as cavalry units in their recce formations, but we don't have that unless there's a command card, Mark, which I haven't looked at the Japanese.
No, I haven't had a chance to look at the command card.
Unless there's command card.
There's no. I would love Japanese ponies.
The Japanese ponies currently are on hold again.
Yeah, well, they did.
Eddie's going to be so upset.
I can't remember if they did a Japanese cavalry list for Manchuria in.
There was an early war.
Early war has one, yeah.
So there's and then
never know,
you
might
get
see
the
one
Japanese bloody tiger and all of the bloody stupid stuff.
But that's easy for them because there's already a model, and this is
it's just
I don't want to use them, but I see.
Well, they're there because
they've made.
I get it. It's all about game balance, right? So if you give the Japanese a tiger, you don't have the debate about the fact that they are potentially vulnerable to Soviet heavy tank lists.
Well, it solves the reserve problem, doesn't it?
Yeah,
right. But that's solving game balance problems, and that's why that's the anti-aircraft gun, the 75mm anti-aircraft gun, which weighs a lot, right?
I was going to say it was a port emplacement, wasn't it? It was typically
it was basically they said, oh, the Americans encountered it, when they were attacking airfields and islands. Yes, they did, right? Where they didn't encounter it was in the jungles of Borneo or Malaya or in Burma, because you didn't need it, but you need it for game balance, right? So, I get it, and it shouldn't take away. So my historically minded rant there shouldn't take away from the fact that if you strip out all of the junk stuff, right, what you end up with is actually some nicely balanced lists that would enable you and actually quite nicely reflect the historicity of it. So you look at the first Arakan and the first bit of the second Arakan campaign, the British get, and in Burma and in Malaya, the British don't do very well. They struggle. They're not particularly used to working in the jungle. If you read the Burma campaign, that just in many ways far too mechanized, coming from lots of the stuff actually coming out of Persia. They work, and then you look and think, well, okay, if you do Kokoda, that's a tough win for the Japanese, against the Chocos. If you do Milne Bay, and you do some of even Guadalcanal works with the list. I just don't know why you would take, if you were going to a competition, which is what I mainly do, why you would take the Americal rather than an ordinary American division. I guess where it's going to start to sting a little bit with me is I suspect that what we'll start to see is people taking, an American North Africa formation with some Marine Stuarts, because they're not reckless, they're fearless, and they get the stand still and shoot rate of fire 6. Yeah, and they're relatively cheap.
I think you'll find the community start. So they'll mix I think you'll see it more common that books can't mix theatres. So you've got North Africa, you've got Pacific. I mean, ETC is already doing it, that you can't mix Eastern Front and North Africa.
Yeah,
I think that will quickly become quite standard.
See, I don't think it will, because I think we're the outliers, right? And I'm perfectly happy to hold my hand up and say I am the arch rivet counter, etc. And everybody knows that. If people want to play the way they want to play, we shouldn't be the arbiters of that, right? And actually, you can play if you did a competition, and somebody had posted on the Flames of War WhatsApp, the UK Flames of War WhatsApp chat, oh, the new book will, maybe it'll liven up the ETC thing. I'm not sure it potentially does.
I don't. I think the Japanese will.
I think that, the Japanese was always going to be the one. I just don't see too many people.
I don't think the other ones are really going. People might do some interesting things with the Commonwealth. I'm with you.
Maybe the Australians. Maybe the Australians. I mean, the
British, the Commonwealth.
But the British grant list is it's just no different to a British grant list in the desert as far as I can see.
No, it's the same.
So, I think what they've done, and I'll give them credit for this, is they've looked at 42, 43. They've made a few errors. Some of them are errors. Some of them I think are in there for gameplay, but they've made it quite, if you look at what happened in that period of time, Japanese attacking mostly, then the start of the counterattacks. You've got a British army that was undergoing a fundamental review of its training and its operations on the back of having its arse handed to it in Malaya and then again in Burma. You've got the Australians doing really well in New Guinea and the start of the American counterattack. I guess the other big missing thing, right, if you're going to have the Japanese tanks in, is Chinese. You could have done some funny stuff with the Chinese because
that would be a horrific army to play.
That's where most of the Japanese tanks were. You need some new casts.
You'd have to be painting 9 platoons.
Well, it depends how you did it. Or you could have put in, there used to be a PDF list for the Dutch, right? You don't really need to resculpt too much because Dutch East Indies uniform is pretty much Romanian, actually. The helmet's very, very, very similar. The kit's not dissimilar. And I think some people...
I thought you meant playing as the Chinese.
Well, so I'm saying that if you're going to use Japanese tanks in mid-war, the place where they are mostly used, there's a few used in Malaya, there's a few used in Burma, but most of the Japanese armored forces are in China. And you could have done something a bit really, really different and said, well, we haven't got the Soviets, but we've got an army that plays differently to the Brits and the Americans and the Japanese, and it's not overpowering against Japanese tanks. Because I do wonder how many Japanese tanks you're going to sell until early war comes out, because they'll die like flies. I mean, anybody with a boys anti-tank rifle's got a chance against a Japanese tank.
Well, I was gonna say it's the one army you want to face with a boys rifle.
They work.
The boys anti-tank rifle can't kill much in the game until now. But all of a sudden, there's a whole plethora. Plethora of stuff you can shoot with it.
So I don't want to sound.
People have to understand they're not tanks. They're armored cars.
They're a bit like tankettes, aren't they?
There is that, however, worth pointing out. I've forgotten which number it is. Doesn't top armor 2? It can be stopped to defensive fire by rifle fire if you're really unlucky. But it does a top armor 2, which is interesting at least.
Yeah.
But on your point, Richard, the one thing
in typo.
No. But the one thing that always perplexes me, and I fully appreciate, we're not, as much as I joke and I like to take good lists, I'm completely on board. We're not going to run around with Japanese tigers and all the wild cards. We'll create that. There's a list that is broadly used and agreed of things that saw combat. What grinds my gears, it isn't even the inclusion of things like the Sentinel, things like that. But I can completely see it, and I understand why. I wish when it's put in as a formation, it would be made clear that it is, in essence, a wild card formation, rather than it just appearing like every other formation in the book. So, for example, the grants in Australia, because I don't think it helps new players. And you've got more and more people coming through who perhaps aren't as familiar with war and history and et cetera on there. And what you could have is a situation where quite honestly, someone's come along and said, I've built a company of grants because why would it not be historic and appropriate for World War II with the Australians? I've got no idea. And they turn, and then they want to go to an event, and like a lot of events, it might, probably be saying the Australians can't field grants because it's a work of fiction. If that had clearly been signposted in the book, that would be better for new players. And it's so easy.
I think the Lee one, the M3 Australian, the M3 medium list is, at least they existed. They existed in a fairly, in a brigade level size for the Australians to practice with. It's just that they never, ever, ever, ever left Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So if you hypothesize a Japanese invasion of Australia, they would have seen.
It's like the Ram tanks. It's exactly the same as the Ram tanks in in the D-Day book. They didn't see combat, but they're presented in terms of, and I'm not like if you want to really read all the blurb about it because they do talk about it, but in terms of the presentation, they're just part of the support. They're just part of another platoon. They sit there beside Shermans, etc. So unless you understand, you go, "Oh, that sounds really cool. I'll build that," and not realizing that you're building a work of fiction.
But they're in. But they're in. The other thing is, I'm not sure about the Sentinel, but the Ram is in World of Tanks. Right, it was a freebie giveaway.
I suspect the Sentinel is as well.
Well, I think
a lot of the things are driven by the fact they have the IP of the World of Tanks.
It wasn't the last time I played. It wasn't, but I suspect it probably has come. I mean, on the plus side, there's a whole load of Kiwi wargamers are now waiting for early war to come out so that they can have their Bob Semple tank formation. Yep. And if you think, go and look that one up because that is Heath Robinson of the nth degree. So I'd give it a 7 actually out of 10 for me. I think it stands alone as a product. I think it's always going to be difficult to take the Pacific armies and put them elsewhere because it's just something completely different. There is quite a bit in there that grinds my gears. I so wish they'd done a Matilda because they could have done some other mid-war releases around it. We were talking before.
Yeah, my suspicion is that I wouldn't be half surprised if we see come the back end of the year some additional formation PDFs.
Yeah.
There's just on a slightly off topic. There's been a lot of speculation around what that blanked out box in the Bagration in the mid-war Eastern Front Berg.
Too late.
Probably T55 formation.
Yeah, T55 in 1942. I love that.
Well, the early, the T44 or something.
T44s, yeah. No, they're already in the book, so that's okay.
Because there's tons of nice stuff you can do with a Matilda out in the Far East. You can stick a flamethrower in it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, they did all sorts of interesting things with that.
They do that. They melt.
Yeah. Well, in plastic,
plastic. So that's why you need to buy metal and resin ones.
Yeah.
So for me, you look at it, and I when I let my disappointment and slight depression about some of it wear off. If you look at it as a way of generating battles for the islands, Guadalcanal, Borneo, New Guinea, Malaya, and Burma, it actually I think it would actually deliver some fairly historical outcomes for a game based around those lists.
Yeah,
you don't have to play the lists that don't exist. Right? You don't have to do that. You can play with six Valentines and play a bit of the Arakan, and I actually think they would work quite nicely. My disappointment with it is it could have been so much more if space hadn't been devoted to putting stuff in there that shouldn't be in there, and a little bit more research had been done about, well, we could have done this, we could have that. Why not put a Gurkha? Why not?
I don't.
List in there?
Is there?
Why not? If you're going to have commandos in the Aussies, I think.
Yeah, if the Aussies are going to be able to field an entire formation of commandos, which they never deploy like that,
aren't they? Chindits are a card.
Chindits are a card, yeah.
So you could have done away with the Sentinels and given the Brits a Chindit list.
Yeah, which would have been quite an interesting list.
Yeah, I mean, and
there are some interesting things stashed in some of the cards,
right?
So, the Australian short 25 gun appears.
The Jungle 25.
The Jungle 25 as its gun is in there. There are some interesting bits and pieces. There's not a huge number in some of the lists, but there are some interesting little bits stashed away. And we have got. We've got the Marmot Harrington and the Indian Pattern Carrier.
And the Indian Pattern Carrier.
The eyepiece, the fact that the only thing I was a bit disappointed I haven't spotted yet is, and that may be because I haven't looked hard enough, is I couldn't see a Blacker Bombard.
No, there isn't.
Which was a bit of a shame. That would have been really cool to get
back. So
I
quite like the ability to dismount your recce patrols, which the Americans can do as well. They can have those of us that can remember.
Yeah, you can actually make use of those dismounted
Yeah, that's
Cal
quite
models you got?
nice.
You're an
And
old
so
player.
for me, it's I think if you play in book, I think it's a nice little book. I just think it could have been better. I think the struggle is going to be if your opponent turns up with
Yeah, it turns out
KVs, or
yeah.
you might struggle. Advantage, of course, is that you don't necessarily have to buy new stuff. If I've got Aussies for the desert, so
Well, I was going to say, if you've got
Milne Bay,
if you've got an American mid-war desert army, you've got Philippine island, you've got a Philippine, you've got perfect US Army Forces Philippines.
Well, not for the Philippines, because they wore the British helmet in the Philippines.
Oh,
don't forget. But you do for Guadalcanal.
Guadalcanal, you've got all the models you'll ever want.
Guadalcanal.
You've got all the models already.
You can give it a suck it and see, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the book itself, as well as I think we should touch on some of the other things that are in the book. There's a lot of actual background. It's maybe a little light in detail in places, but there's quite a lot of background pages in there. Sort of the battle histories are quite a nice thing. Richard's frozen. We've upset him that much.
No, connections.
Oh, there he is. So there's some good things like that. You've got the beach landing scenario they've repeated in the book, which is nice, along with a couple of others as well. And there's some quite nice, there's some quite nice new products from Battlefield in a Box as well coming out for it, which I noticed they're in wave 2 of the releases. So cool. I might see if I can get my hands on it. There's some particularly interesting looking jungle bushes and stuff.
Mark's looking perplexed.
Which look quite nice as well.
What are you looking perplexed for, mate? Now you're on mute. It wasn't me, honest. I didn't mute you.
Unmute. Don't know why it went. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Are they new releases, or are they?
Aren't they Vietnam stuff?
I suspect. I don't know, because I'm not a Vietnam.
Because I've got some of that for Vietnam.
I didn't play Nam. Some of it definitely looks like the Paddy Fields have definitely come out in the Nam set. I didn't know whether for Nam they released the Jungle Palms and stuff.
Yes.
It could well be
thick bushes with the foliage.
Yeah, so it could well be a reboxing of that, but it's certainly the first time we've seen it in the World War II theatre.
So I'm going to defend the Americans for a second. I'm just looking at the Marines.
Go on, because I did say the Marines were all right. It was the American infantry that I didn't really see.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do think it's worth certainly back to them. So, the Marines, fearless, 2+ counterattack, careful, trained with 3+ tactics, 11 points for 10 stands. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, those are rifle stands, but you can add other stuff to them. Also, because we've got access to the dynamic points, which are getting released.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
Well, I presume it's coming out.
I'm not going to start reading them all. I'm not going to start reading them all out, but I think we can, pick and choose some good examples of why you should be excited about stuff. So the Marine Shermans are quite interesting, and they've just piqued my interest. So, if you compare it to a normal US Army one, you keep the green, but you've got 4+ assault. You're fearless and you're aggressive. And I'm just checking to check I'm not reading it wrongly, but I think they're going to come out at 6 points a tank. That's pretty good.
Yeah, they're competitive.
The problem is
three for 18. I'm going to have to look now how much it costs for the ones in dynamic points in fighting.
The problem for the Marine tanks is the conversation that we were having about the Germans before.
You get 4 platoons of tanks, of which one is the HQ tank.
Yeah, and so you've got that same survivability issue that you get with the Germans.
Yeah.
Whereas with the army tanks, you get the armored mortars and the T-75s.
Okay, so it costs you 1 point more.
Yeah, to be fearless.
It costs you 1 point more to be fearless and have a 4+ assault. Yeah, I see what you
Yeah,
mean.
you see,
Whether
why
it's
would
worth the trade-off of
you
not
just
having
take an ordinary
integrated
Sherman
recce
formation and
artillery.
pack the formation out? I think.
Yeah.
I think the Stuarts, I think the Marine Stuarts make a filler.
Yeah.
You know, an ally. You know, a second command.
Yeah, if you want to
I
go
think
down
that's where they
if
come
you
in,
want to if you want to go down a 2 formation, if you don't want to
Yeah.
bulk out your Marine platoons with all the extras,
yes,
you know, because whilst as Mark says, you know, they're only 11 points for 10 to start with, but that's just you haven't got that's just 10 Garand teams.
yeah,
You've then got to buy a bazooka, you've got to buy a mortar, you've got to buy some LMGs.
Yeah, your flamethrower is 2 points.
Your 2 points, you're adding your flamethrower. You're soon going to be at 15, 16 points a platoon.
yeah. Then you could, but you can then squeak in a small Stuart formation.
Then you chuck in some Stuarts,
twos, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't want the Stuart formation because they're not good enough. They're not going to kill. Yeah, yes. If you were playing the Japanese, yes.
If you play, yes, that's right. That's what it comes down to.
Around with everybody else, you need, you know, you're going to be looking at those Shermans.
I don't know.
That's the thing. Even if you went 3 strong,
something that can speed up and shoot 5 machine guns. So you've got 15 shots to support your infantry going in. So, you know, if you're gonna smoke and then hope that you can pin, you've got 15 shots to go towards that. I
think somebody's going to work out I think somewhere with some thought, there's a Marine Sherman list with Marine infantry to get access to the mortars, to give you the smoke, etc. There's definitely a list to be had there. I'm not convinced, as you say, it's going to suddenly replace the top tier. But you know,
there's certainly a competitive American infantry build there somewhere.
There is. There's some thought to be had to that list. I wouldn't write the Marines. I wouldn't write it off.
No,
I did say I thought the Marines added something, whereas they
definitely
the Army infantry list is, you know, it's nothing unless there's something in the cards.
I haven't actually looked. You know, we can discuss command. I'll bring them up. I haven't actually looked at the American command cards much.
Well, I haven't looked at any of the command cards because you screwed uploading them onto the Facebook page.
They're not. I haven't screwed it up because I'm looking at them right now.
But
I can't see them. They've just disappeared from wherever you put them. Anyway, look, we've been talking.
Honestly, Richard, you and technology.
Well, you can't tell I used to work in IT, can you? So we've been. I did.
Used being the operative word there, Richard.
Civil service IT, right? That's probably why the civil service IT is.
Oh my goodness, you'll like this one. Here you go. If you want to hear something funny, naval gunfire support.
Oh, don't.
But almost a fifth of your army costs.
20 points.
You
can have a battleship.
You have an unlimited range artillery, anti-tank 4 firepower auto, and on a 4+, so you can request naval gunfire from an observer or formation HQ, and on a 4+, they may spot for a 4-person gun using their skill rating. So you get it on a 4+, like air.
So
then you've got to range it.
So that's the same as the D-Day card, isn't it, for naval gunfire?
So you get it half the time, and then
half the time it isn't going to range it because you're green.
Yeah, and then it ranges in once every 6 turns.
And you can't repeat it.
No.
And it's almost a fifth of your army points.
Yeah, but it ruins the day of an elephant if it catches the elephant underneath it.
Oh, you can downgrade your American Army rifle platoons to Springfield rifles for a point saving.
Oh wow!
But then you do
make them even worse.
You do have
Philippine Rifle Company.
Big hats required.
You do have to put.
You can get a Philippine rifle platoon, which is the same as the other ones. It's the same as a US rifle platoon, but you get 10 stands of just normal rifles, slow firing if they're pinned, and they're reluctant, but it's super cheap. Super cheap. 155 field artillery. Now that's interesting because people have been saying they want to bring those models back. They're back. You can field the 155 howitzer.
I don't think it's the 155 howitzer though.
Well, the M1918 155
Yeah,
millimeter howitzer.
It's a French 155.
Oh, it's the French one.
And I think the reason I wonder if the reason why there is all of a sudden a card for a French 1918 style
gun.
might be because there is about to be a model for a French Snipe 155 early war howitzer.
£25 American 25 pounders, because in New Guinea in the 32nd Infantry they used a battery of 425 pounders supplied by the Australians. I like cards like that.
The trouble with cards like
American Universal Carriers,
as we all know, is that they become a de facto choice because the fact that the 25 pounder is such a superior gun in mid-war.
I've already found an issue.
105 when you can take a 25 pounder and use it like a big tank gun.
Yeah. With a better rate of fire, it's got a turn. It's got a turn.
Tank 9.
It's got rate of fire 2.
As opposed to rate of fire 1, tank 8.
American specific players are going to be getting ready to buy 5 Universal Carriers. Stand by to see that. You've got the Engineers M3 lead tank. That makes them amphibious flame tanks. Oh, you can have have Flame Stuarts.
No, you can't. Not until 1940. Very, very late.
Well, according to this command card. No. In early 1943, after the experience of Guadalcanal, both the U.S. Army and Marine Corps began drawing up plans to mount.
They began drawing up plans.
Began arriving in late 1943. So that's all right.
Because I looked it up because I scratch built some for when version 3 came out, and the M3 Satan is late war. It's not available in mid war.
Well, late 43 is in period.
Right. So
there we go. So you can have Flame Stuart, and then there's there's some special characters, bits and pieces.
How much are they then, Mark? How much are the
Flame Stuarts? So you take your Stuarts, you reduce their halted rate of fire to 4. Moving forward with the machine guns, and they gain flamethrower weapon and flame tank rule, and that is 2 points. I'm trying to. I have to read the card better. I don't know, because it says you gain the flamethrower weapon and flame tank rule. So does that mean you still keep the main gun?
Yeah. It's hull mounted.
No.
It's turret mounted.
The flamethrower goes where the gun was.
It was in the turret, wasn't it?
Well,
yeah. The flamethrower goes where the gun was.
Because it's on the part has been on the sprue since they manufactured it.
The card doesn't say
that. The first flame tanks the Marines were able to field during the Pacific Campaign, with its first deployment coming in, drumroll, mid-1944.
Yeah, because it must have.
So it's got a Ronson machine. It's got a Ronson.
It's a Ronson, isn't it? Yeah, it's a Ronson flamethrower. Yeah,
in the turret. It's very short. It actually looks a little bit like a Scott, because it's got a very squat.
Yeah, it's quite stubby.
So I scratch built mine by using a bit of sprue instead of the.
Yeah, because on the plastic sprue, the part is on the plastic sprue.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I built mine using Zvezda.
Yeah, the part is on the plastic sprue.
Well, that card's going to cause an argument, because the way I read it, it doesn't lose its gun, but I have been wrong before. So hold fast what it should be, but that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
it's not a week without a good command card argument.
No, because you take the main gun and the coax out.
So it still gets 4 machine guns.
Yeah, that's the hull and machine guns. That'll be that. Well, it's got 2 on the. It's got the hull and.
Oh, were we saying? Did we mention that there's Gurkha command cards? I can't remember.
No, well, that was the question.
There are Gurkha command cards. You can take Gurkhas.
Better in assault.
So they become. So Gurkhas are trained with a 2+ assault due to the cookery.
Yeah.
And they get the mountaineer rule.
Yeah.
Another
useful rule.
They can take mortars. I mean, it's obviously your Gurkhas, machine guns, jungle fighters. You can get a jungle fighter rule. There's some Gurkha characters as well, and some Indian characters. There's not a lot of command cards, actually, for the Commonwealth. The Australians have their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another. So that's a conversation, is it? So Australia is its own nation in Southeast Asia,
But it comes
but
included
in
in the
North
British.
Africa they're British.
Yeah. Yeah, which,
And in
which is
fact,
really interesting, and all the cards come in the British and Indian Commonwealth deck pack.
really,
Yes,
okay.
which is why it's so
So
expensive.
I foresee there being an ETC argument about this.
Yeah,
And of
because
course, historically, they
the
were
way
all
they're
British
the way
anyway.
it's
Till that.
presented, the way they're presented in the book is as a, you know, you've got
separate,
British and Indians.
yeah,
You get all the way through. You get to the bottom. You get the British and Indian wildcards. Then you get Australia
yeah.
and
And you
all
go,
the
well,
Australia.
so why are the Australians different to like the Canadians in
Yeah.
Normandy, or
Yeah,
the Australians or New Zealanders or Indians
yeah.
or Free
Anywhere
French
else.
or Poles or
Yeah,
everybody else?
it's an interesting
Because
way to have done it.
It's not really
It's not
separate.
a nation.
It's it's not
It's
got
not a
separate
nation.
tactical stuff. It's
No.
not got separate weaponry to
No.
a large extent, short 25s and stuff like that. And historically, of course, sorry for any Australian watchers out there, you were all British until 1947.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
technically,
It's
actually, still
it's quite.
1984.
I was quite I was quite intrigued by the way they structured the book around the Australians, because it at first look it looks like they're a completely separate nation, and it's only when you look at it really hard you realise that it's got that very faded British background to the Australia
So
pages.
it's got the same colour. Yeah,
yeah, it's got the same borders. It's when you see the page borders and the card borders that you realise that and the price point of the card decks, because they're obviously bigger, so they're more expensive. The British card deck is British, and the American card decks are considerably more expensive than the Japanese.
Well, the American card deck's probably going to be about 10% more expensive, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be more than that.
Are they from China? In which case, they're going to be a fucking fortune.
I believe the
Sorry.
card decks
It's a
are.
new rule. You deploy your American army, and well, you only get 90% of your point. You only get to deploy 90 points for a 100-point battle.
Yeah, because you've got to pay your tariff.
Got to pay your tariff.
In fact, you are right, Rich. I believe they are the die cards do come from China.
So what we should do is we should
Originally,
just charge
along with the
anybody
books.
using an American army an extra £2 on their entrance fee for a competition. Say, sorry, it's the most beautiful word in the world, isn't it? Tariffs. If you want to bring Americans, you've got to pay more to enter. How many more people can
we love you all, really?
The Americans.
Well, not being funny, I did notice. I was looking on the web store, and I did notice. You know, if you want to talk about a few other something slightly off topic, the Battlefront's pricing differential has increased for the States.
Has it for the States?
So the American guys.
Changed?
Yeah, they're running at an exchange. They're running at an elevated exchange rate.
But they've always have, haven't they?
No, it's not been as high as it is now.
Oh, so they're really kicking in.
Oh, well.
Well, I see it in 3D printing. Lots of stuff. There's a lot of people talking, going how they're resin printers and all of that's going up. It's like, are you in America? And they're like, yeah. Well, yeah. It's not happening in Canada. It's not happening here. But yeah, it's a real. That's it. There you go.
Right.
So, but hey, at least because at one stage they were facing. Was it something like 30% on anything out of Malaysia, which is obviously where Battlefront
42, I think it was.
42, so at least that's 10% at the minute.
Yeah. There's
right, we are moving.
I was going to say, Rich, it's been fun, but I am going to have to run now.
Yeah, we've been on a wee while. Right. So listen, everybody, have a good Easter. Hopefully you're getting some time away from work. I did say that we'd try and do this every month, and I failed to do that again. Maybe we'll have a chat about dynamic points. Feel free to leave some comments after we've finished, and I hope that's been helpful in terms of giving everybody a view as to what we think. And Martin, I'll see you whenever. Well, we'll eventually meet in person at some point.
We'll see.
I will see you in Lanarkshire in a couple of weeks, Mr. Goddard.
For the Scottish Nationals.
Oh yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah. What are you fielding, Richard?
Not telling you yet. Lists aren't in.
Not Germans. I know it's not Germans.
Hey, so here's a shock. It will not be Hungarians, Romanians, Germans, or Italians.
I think I know what you're fielding. Read my battle report before you do.
You won't be bringing
Well,
them.
but the thing is, Mark, I don't take SU 122s and then go to a competition and get surprised.
Yeah,
Like firing.
I know what they do
Honestly,
first.
that first
I
game,
kinda
when I
knew
sat
that.
down, I was like, I've really screwed this up.
Right, I'm gonna have to go, guys.
All right.
See you later.
Take care,
Take care.
everybody.
Bye.
See ya.